I took a cruise on my own, on board one of the oldest cruise ships that I've been on to date, P&O Aurora. She launched to the market back in the year 2000, which makes her almost as old as I am, and I was a little bit nervous before boarding the ship. Would I find a ship that was really needing some TLC and a bit of attention, or would I find a cruise ship that I would really enjoy spending time on? Well, I guess the only way for me to find out was to walk up that gangway and head on board. If you've just found my channel today, then I'm Fraser. I use my YouTube channel to share my cruise experiences with you, to hopefully show you more about an industry that I absolutely love, and also to help you get the most out of your future cruises. In this video today, I am going to share with you everything from my time on board P&O Aurora. I'm going to show you the ship, my cabin, the food, the entertainment, the port we visited, and so much more in between. Let's get started today by talking about the itinerary for this cruise. I was on board for a pretty short 3-night cruise that would see us leave Southampton on day 1, spend day 2 in Zeebrugge, which is the port for Bruges in Belgium, before then enjoying a day at sea on day 3, ahead of our return into Southampton the following morning. There were a few reasons why I chose this cruise, one of them being the price, but I'll come back and tell you more about that later in this video. I arrived at Southampton to find a really quick embarkation process. I've been on some of the much bigger ships, and they have queues right out to the front of the building at times, so it was great to see that this just wasn't the case here. I guess that's probably one of the benefits to cruising on a smaller ship. For reference, P&O Aurora has a guest capacity of just under 1,900 passengers and a crew capacity of about 850. When you compare that capacity to the likes of Iona and Arvia, the much bigger ships in the fleet, it really is no surprise that the queues are almost non-existent in comparison, because there's hardly anyone boarding the ship. I got on board at about 4 PM, which meant I was able to go straight to the cabin before then heading out to explore the rest of the ship. When I arrived at the cabin, I was absolutely delighted to find that my luggage had already beaten me to it, which is one of the fastest luggage deliveries that I've ever seen on any cruise ship. I booked a solo balcony cabin on this cruise and I was allocated cabin D202. There's a D in that room number because P&O Cruises name and letter some of their decks on board, so deck number 8 is also known as the D deck. I'll come back to cover how much I paid for my cruise later in the video, but I was really impressed with this cabin given the price. I felt the room gave me everything I needed to be super comfortable for this 3-night cruise, and I'd have been more than happy to cruise for a longer time in here by the end of it. I find the short cruises really useful to determine how much you enjoy a cabin. If I'm ready to leave it and go home by the end of a short cruise, then I'm delighted I haven't booked the full week. I liked the fact the bed in this cabin was slightly wider than a single bed, but I'd love a solo cabin to still offer a double bed. After all, how many single people do you know in the real world who actively choose to sleep in a single bed? I actually don't think I know any. I also loved the fact that I had a kettle in this room with tea, coffee, 2 mugs and some biscuits. I always find this such a British thing, but I absolutely love making a coffee in the room in the morning before I head out to face the rest of the ship. It's such a luxury. One interesting observation was that there was 2 mugs in this cabin, but there was only 1 chair out on my balcony, so I guess if I made a friend, I could sit on the chair and they could just stand and look out. I'm not sure. But anyway, let's move on to think about the balcony. You knew I was going to mention this, the balcony. As a solo cruiser, I very rarely book cabins with balconies due to the fact that I usually need to pay a solo supplement. I try to be as careful with my money as possible any time that I cruise, and so booking cabins on the inside of the ship with no window is usually my approach. After all, the less money that I pay to a cruise line, the more cruises I get to go on, which is mega simple maths for me. The balcony in this cabin was what most cruise lines would refer to as an enclosed balcony, meaning that instead of the usual glass frontage, you've got a solid surround that goes all the way round. Some people think that this can make your room feel quite dark, but I absolutely loved it. The fun fact with this cabin is that it's actually where the kids club used to be. When P&O Aurora was launched, she was initially working as a family-friendly ship, so people of all ages could go on board. However, she was then refitted in 2019, and that's when she became an adult-only cruise ship, meaning that facilities like the kids' club, for example, were removed and other things were put in its place. In this case here, when the kids' club was removed, my cabin, along with all of the others in that section of the ship, were added, which meant that I was actually staying in one of the newest cabins on board, which I thought was pretty cool. As the location of this cabin used to be a public venue, it was also so close to all the action on board. It took me, no exaggeration, about 40 steps to go from my cabin along to the Glasshouse restaurant and bar, which was so convenient. One thing that was also quite odd was that my cabin was so close to the lifeboats. I'd actually passed these on my way to the Glasshouse. I've never stayed in a cruise ship cabin where I could be at a lifeboat within a matter of seconds. Hopefully, that's not a luxury that I'll ever have to take advantage of. Before I leave the cabin behind, let's see if you know the answer to this. Underneath my television, there were these really weird shoelace-like things hanging down. If you know what these are for, let me know in the comments because it confused me so much. I just could not figure out why these were there. I mentioned that I got on board the ship at about 4 PM. Now this is much later than I would usually like to board a cruise ship on embarkation day, but there was a good reason for this. A few days before the cruise, I received an email from P&O Cruises to explain that all embarkation slots were to be pushed back. The email read, "During the last cruise, a number of people have reported to the medical centre with symptoms of gastrointestinal illness. To control the spread of illness, we've proactively stepped up our already robust disinfection measures." As the ship was due to be deep cleaned before we could get on board, that meant that P&O Cruises asked everyone to arrive about 90 minutes after their predetermined and pre-booked embarkation slot. That then pushed me back to 4 PM. I was initially a little bit nervous after receiving this email, but I did cruise with P&O Cruises shortly after the pandemic closed down, and they handled everything perfectly. So, to be honest, although I was a little bit nervous, I was nowhere near concerned enough to even think about not going on the cruise, because cruise lines like this deal with this sort of thing so frequently that I had absolute faith in them that they would disinfect the ship and then we could get on and have a great holiday. The experience on board Aurora did change slightly from what we're used to now that hopefully COVID is long gone. Things like the crew serving most of the food up at the buffet was now the norm again. The crew were also manning things like the tea and coffee stations to then make sure that customers had minimal touch points all around the buffet area. One thing that I was really surprised at, but in a great way, was that there was crew at every single entrance to the buffet restaurant instructing people to wash and sanitize their hands. I thought this was great because one of the things that I love about cruise ships is how much it's encouraged and it is totally acceptable for you to sanitize all the time, for you to use a tissue to open the bathroom doors. I really wish that was more socially acceptable in the real world on land. One observation that I did make was that even although we were on this cruise ship where every passenger had received an email to say that there were issues the previous week, I did still see a lot of my fellow passengers deciding to use the bathroom and then not wash their hands when they would leave to then enter an eating area. That sort of thing really drives me mad, so please, if you're watching this video, wash your hands and sanitize. After checking out my cabin, it was time to go and explore the rest of the ship before sail away. I have cruised on most of the other cruise ships in the P&O Cruises fleet, and one thing that was really great to see was that I felt as though the brand pulled through really well onto this ship. It was really clear walking around that you were on a cruise ship operated by P&O Cruises, and I really love to see that. Out of the 7 ships in the P&O Cruises fleet, I've only got one left to tick off, and that's Iona. So I would consider myself to be relatively well versed when it comes to P&O Cruises. Some of the venues on Aurora looked almost brand new, and the main atrium in here was absolutely gorgeous. One thing that I really loved about the main atrium was all of the fresh flowers. I love fresh flowers on a cruise ship, especially when they've got a strong smell and you can smell them from upstairs. This was exactly the case on here. In all honesty, it took me back to my days cruising on Cunard on board Queen Elizabeth, where I would love to take a walk through the main atrium and through the Queen's room every single morning just to smell all the flowers on board. I absolutely love it. Sailing out of Southampton was absolutely beautiful. I really enjoy when you get a sunny sail away from a UK port and you can actually get outside and enjoy the scenery as you sail away, rather than hiding inside, trying to stay dry and trying to stay out of the rain. After I booked this cruise, I found that there were so many other YouTubers on board too, so you might see some other familiar faces as we go through this video. This was something that I loved about this cruise. Prior to this one, I had met a few cruise YouTubers, but not too many. I found it really motivational to meet people who have been watching their channel for years. Weirdly, with some people it was as if I had known them for years, despite the fact that this cruise was the first time I'd ever met them. It was so strange. We all watched the sail away together from one of the decks at the back of the ship. This is one feature of P&O Aurora that I absolutely adore. This aft-facing deck is just absolutely stunning. After sailing out, I then headed for dinner with my friend Lucy. She's also on YouTube as Cruising as Crew, so you should head over there and check her channel out if you haven't already. We ate at Sindhu, which is the onboard Indian restaurant, which is one of my favourite speciality restaurants at sea. You do pay extra to eat in here, but I've always felt that it's really good value, and the food is so tasty. If you're looking for my recommendation, then I would really recommend the Sindhu signature plate, which means that you get 3 curries and they're all absolutely brilliant. I then followed that with what they call a dark chocolate sphere, and honestly, it was wonderful. Your mouth might water watching this video, but I felt from a value for money point of view, this dessert alone I paid £5 for, but I know I'd have paid much more for that if I was eating at a nice restaurant back at home. After Sindhu, when we were both almost too full to move, it was then time to leave the restaurant and head along to the main theatre. That's where we would then be able to sample our first taste of the entertainment on board the ship. In here, the show tonight was called Odyssey, and it was essentially like a cover band who were singing some songs and doing some dances on stage. I enjoyed the entertainment on board this ship, but I was expecting the shows to be bigger. I can only imagine that it's partly due to the fact that Aurora is a much smaller ship than some of her other fleet mates. It's maybe also because on the 3-nighter, the bigger shows maybe weren't scheduled, but I found the shows were a nice way to pass the time, but I wouldn't go back on another cruise on Aurora just for the theatre shows. The following morning, we woke up in Zeebrugge, which is the port for Bruges. Annoyingly, it was raining outside. Of course, we managed to get a sunny sail away from Southampton, so the rain was going to catch up with us at some point, wasn't it? Anyway, what did I do with my day in Zeebrugge? Did I go into the town? Did I take the train to Bruges? Well, actually, this is where I maybe have to make a bit of a confession. I didn't leave the ship, and I stayed on board. Now, that's partly due to the fact that I've been to Bruges before, and I absolutely love the city. I think it's absolutely great. The architecture is stunning. There are canals everywhere. Who can forget the chocolate and, of course, the beer? Bruges is a fantastic city, but it's mostly due to the fact that I was on a 3-night cruise, and I wanted to try and explore and experience as much of the ship as possible. With there only being one port on this itinerary, I suspected that most of my fellow passengers would head ashore and would probably head into Bruges, leaving me with a beautifully quiet Aurora to explore. I spent most of today filming my full ship tour for Aurora, which, on that note, if you'd like to watch it, I've put the link down in the description of this video that you can head to at the end of this one. Since the weather wasn't great in the morning, I really enjoyed doing a few laps of the promenade deck down on deck 7. Because the lifeboats are suspended over that deck rather than right beside it, you get some brilliant uninterrupted views looking out over the water. So for me, I was able to walk around, stay dry, and also get a good view. There's also loads of seating options out here, although I didn't choose to take advantage of any of them because it was pretty cold. While spending the day filming my ship tour, it was so clear that P&O Cruises are taking really good care of this cruise ship. It was really great to see how some spaces feel brand new and super modern. For example, Masquerade, which is one of the entertainment venues that then turns into the ship's nightclub. On the other hand, some spaces were much older in design. For example, the Curzon Theatre. Some people would look at this theatre and maybe think it was dated and quite old-fashioned, but I really loved how it felt like a bit of a step back in time when you would come in here to see a show. I actually really hope that if and when Aurora gets refitted in the future, they don't just rip out this old theatre and put something new in, because I really like how this one feels. After I'd finished filming, I popped upstairs for a burger by the pool. And this was so tasty. I always think when you're trying to review cruise ships, it's good to try the things that almost every cruise ship and almost every cruise line do. One of them is poolside burgers, and this one was pretty good. As the day went on, the sun did manage to break through and the weather did end up lovely for us sailing out of Zeebrugge. I watched us leave from the aft deck area where I saw Sail Away from the previous day from Southampton, starting at one of the bars on the higher decks and then working my way down to finish watching Sail Away down at the pool, which is down on deck 8. My fun fact is that that's actually the deck that my cabin was on. My cabin was a stone's throw away from that pool, which, again, is pretty cool. When I was up at the bar, watching the ship leave, I did notice something that I have seen a few times before on cruise ships. While I was standing looking out, we were sprayed with what felt like little mini hailstones is the best way that I could describe them. The waiter then came over and changed my drink, and also told me to just check my clothes once I went back to the cabin. I have seen this before, but you can sometimes get a little bit of a sooty spray coming out of some of the funnels on cruise ships. And I'd imagine it's probably more common on the older ships. I did have little black things on my arms, and you could also see them dotted along the railings and a lot of the furniture at the back section of the ship. When I then worked my way down to the pool down on deck 8, you could also see these little black particles floating in the water. I can only imagine that cruise lines must come out after Sail Away and clean all of this up so frequently. I've never ever seen the soot floating in the water before. It was quite strange to see. After watching Sail Away, I then headed back to my cabin to get ready for dinner because tonight was going to be formal night on board. First of all, I should say that I didn't have any black marks on my clothes, so once I'd wiped it off my arms and wherever else, I was absolutely fine. Tonight was formal night, and so it was time for me to smarten myself up before heading out for dinner. Lots of the venues on P&O Cruises ships operate with black tie dress codes on formal night, and they can be pretty strict about it. This is one thing that caught me off guard when I first started cruising with P&O. For whatever reason, I just assumed that it would probably be really relaxed, and even although it says formal, it probably wouldn't be formal. But that's really not the case. You will be turned away from venues on these ships if you're not dressed appropriately. So my advice to you is get involved and try and embrace it for what it is, and take something a little bit smarter with you on your cruise. Yeah, okay. There are some venues that you can go to if you don't like dressing up, but me personally, I was only on this cruise for 3 nights, so I didn't want to spend that eating at the buffet. The meal tonight was lovely. I was overall really impressed with the included food on this cruise. In the main dining room, the menu offers you a range of starters, a range of main courses and some desserts. There's then a signature selection that you can choose from in the middle of the menu if you'd like to have something a little bit more special. I opted for the hand-cut salmon ceviche, followed by the curried corn-fed chicken Kiev, and then I finished it off with a beetroot brownie cake, which was nice, but in all honesty, it was one of the driest things that I've ever eaten. I think I made it about halfway through and then thought, do you know what? This isn't worth it. The amount of water I need to drink to finish this just isn't worth it. So I decided that half of my brownie cake was enough. After dinner, we were then treated to a beautiful sunset at sea, which allowed us to get some really great fun photos out on the promenade deck before heading in to see another show. Before returning back into Southampton, we had a whole day at sea to enjoy on board. As soon as I woke up, I could tell from the second I opened my curtains that the weather outside was absolutely beautiful. It made me so excited to get out and enjoy a day just floating around, enjoying the ship. The sea was so smooth that you honestly could barely feel it from on board the ship. I kicked off my day with breakfast down in the dining room. On this ship, the way that breakfast in the main dining room works is that you turn up, join the queue, and when you get to the front of the queue, you're then given a buzzer. I never know the official term for these, but let's just go with buzzer for now. You then go and sit down somewhere, and then when the buzzer buzzes or vibrates, you then know that your table's ready. So you then make your way back into the dining room to be seated by one of the waiting staff. When I got to my table, I was absolutely delighted to realise that not only was I at a table for one, which is great for me on some mornings, I was also sitting at a table right by the window. I absolutely love being on a cruise ship, enjoying a window seat as I eat my breakfast on a sea day. It's one of my favourite ways to spend a morning. I ordered a coffee, which is an absolute non-negotiable on my breakfast table, a fruit plate, and then an Eggs Benedict. If you've followed me for a while, you're maybe thinking, I wonder if P&O Cruises were able to deliver a runny yolk. I absolutely love a runny egg yolk with an Eggs Benedict. And I can confirm that on here, yeah, they did run. I'm not going to say they were the runniest eggs I've ever had, but I'm going to consider it a pass for now. After breakfast, I then cracked on with spending the day just relaxing and enjoying this cruise ship. I just loved walking around and sitting out in the sun because at home I very rarely get the time to do that. There were quite a lot of people sunbathing out on the decks, but for me it was a little bit too cold. It's got to be hot for me to want to lie and sunbathe on a cruise ship, and in the middle of the English Channel, I don't think the temperatures are there for me. Mid-afternoon, I then popped upstairs to try another poolside eatery. Yesterday, you'll remember that I tried the burger and gave it a thumbs up, and today I thought it was only fair to give the pizza a go. I am delighted to confirm that the pizza was also really, really tasty, and I would also give it a really big thumbs up. I went for pizza today with Emma, who I'm sure will be a very familiar face to so many of you here on YouTube. She's one who it was very surreal to meet on this cruise because we've only ever spoken digitally or virtually over the last few years, but it genuinely felt as though I knew her so well from the minute I met her on day one of the cruise. Very surreal, but great. The day today seemed to completely disappear. Before I knew it, it was time to head back to the cabin to get changed out of my shorts and t-shirt and get ready for dinner. Tonight I opted to eat in the main dining room again, and I chose to start with Caesar salad, followed by chicken as a main, and then I finished off with ice cream. I think you can tell by my choice of dessert, I was terrified to have another dry situation like last night, so you can't go wrong with a couple of scoops of vanilla ice cream. As the sun set on this final evening of the cruise, I couldn't help but think how great a trip this had been for me and how happy I was with what I'd paid for the cruise. For this 3-night trip, I paid £479 or $594 US, which works out at £159 or $198 US per night. When you consider the fact that this included a balcony cabin, solo, and it included most of my food on board, I actually felt like this was really, really good value. So, the big question, would I take another cruise on P&O Aurora? Undoubtedly, yes. Before taking this cruise, I'd heard that some P&O cruisers were really incredibly loyal to this ship alone, and I didn't really get that from what I'd seen online before cruising on her. However, I did feel that this ship felt nothing like any other P&O Cruises ship that I've ever been on. I genuinely think there is something really, really special about this cruise ship, and I really hope it never loses that. If you enjoyed this video today, then please do give it your thumbs up, and please also consider supporting my channel by clicking the subscribe button. If you'd like to find out more about P&O Aurora and you'd like to see more from my time on board, then why not come over and join me in another video. Over on my channel, I've got loads of content from P&O Cruises, and I've got more videos from this cruise linked in the description of this one. If you'd like to join me for a full ship tour, then why not join me in this video. Over here, I take you on a full tour covering every single venue on every single deck of this pretty special cruise ship. Thank you so much for watching today. Have a great day, and I'll hopefully see you over in another video.